Hi, team. Welcome to 10 Talks. Today we have a guest, a UCLA Bruin, which near and dear to my heart. And so very fun just to share the story of really how women win our way. So if you're just tuning in and listening to us, Kathy and I are on a project to figure out how do women win and what is our way. And so we've gathered these champion coaches and athletes and just started to ask these questions like, let's figure this out. And so today's conversation is going to be all about coaching females, really making sure that as females, are we leaning into conflict and really how do we be nice and also accomplish these champion results. And so you're going to get to hear from a guest that not only won a national championship as a player, but also as a coach. And that is a huge accomplishment. So Sue and Kathy, welcome. Kathy, thank you for being on this project with us. I know you and I are enjoying the process. And so share with us the guests that we have today.
Yeah, well, Sue Enquist is just one of the icons in the sports world. At UCLA, you know, they've won 13 national championships in softball, and Sue was part of 11 of them as a player, as an assistant coach, as an associate head coach, and then as a head coach in her own right. But Sue, the reason that I'm so excited about talking to you today certainly has to do with all that history, but a lot of it has to do with what you've done since you retired from coaching in 2006. And okay, so you are an incredible motivational speaker, and you've done a lot of that. You've been an entrepreneur and starting One Softball and getting that business going in the softball community. You've also become an invaluable advisor to coaches of national teams, of elite teams. And those are some of the things that I hope that we can talk about a little bit today and explore. And so, as Carletta said, we're excited about exploring what things women can do and women coaches can do to be effective with their female athletes. And one of the things that we always know is that there will be these stressed out days, these bad performances, and there will be kids that don't get along. And so how do we get women athletes, how do we get women to get into those conflict situations and thrive?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. And it's great to meet and see both of you. Kathy, it's great to see you again. And I just want to publicly thank you for all your mentorship when I was a coach, but more importantly, in my post-coaching career. I just appreciate you and what you're trying to do in building great leaders, great champions. The question is a great one. And I think what I'd like to do is just unpack it at a macro level and then go down to the micro level. At a macro level, I think what happens to coaches that struggle is we're so passionate about what we're doing, how we're doing it. It's a deeply personal industry where you lay your integrity on the line, your reputation, and your love for the game. And you learn very quickly that not everybody loves it. Not everybody has the same level of integrity. And you're also very vulnerable to being misunderstood. So at a macro level, if coaches could really sit back and just take a moment and think about themselves first. I always call it the 3 rings. The inner ring is yourself and the awareness of how you enter into the sport as a participant, as a leader, and as a coach with your team. Number 2 is, how do you interact with your team and what kind of conditions are you creating for today's athlete? And then number 3, and I think this is one where people don't talk enough about, and that is the idea of the game itself, the industry itself. I always believe the game is perfect and we're the imperfect ones. So if the coach can first, I'll always try to be prefacing, what ring am I talking about? But I think most of our mistakes start in the inner ring because once we realize earlier in our career that our team is just a cross section of society. And this idea that everyone is going to be in alignment is a fallacy. And so when we talk about the stressors and the emotions and the conflict, if we could actually lower the standard with our team and say, hey, listen, as a head coach, if you could learn to say, hey, listen, I know we're not all on the same page. You have no idea how many players are going to exhale right there, because we have built in the coaching industry, we've built this narrative that is built on the model of championship programs, right? So people come talk about championship programs, that we put out all the nice furniture, look at all the nice furniture in our house, and the stuff that's in the closet never gets talked about. And if we did a better job of saying, as championship programs and championship coaches, hey, there are days I am a clown car. I'm literally packing in everybody, and I don't really know where we're going on this day, whether we're loving each other or hating each other. So number one, lower the standard on how perfect we all have to be. And that includes yourself. So as coaches today, if you want to manage that stress or that conflict and you want your players to be equally comfortable with it, you got to get in the clown car with them. You got to be in it with them. And they'll have a tendency to buy in more when you as the coach are saying, I'm right here with you in this conflict, whatever it is. It could be, once again, the ring, the player conflict with themselves, the player conflict with their teammates, the player conflict with their relationship with the game, because they come to you with different sets of relationships with the game based on their experience.
Well, and what do you do with that identity piece, which so much about sports is our identity? I mean, we start so young and everything is wrapped up in that performance. And our college athletes, they were very successful before they got to college, or they wouldn't be there. And so they're entering into a conflict with maybe their first female coach that they've ever had, maybe their first time they're surrounded by great other female athletes. Talk just a bit about really how you honor yourself as a female, and you honor that you may not like conflict, or you may, really struggle being confrontive or even competing, and knowing that you really do want to be liked and accepted. And how do you manage that to produce a champion result?
Well, the first thing you have to do is, as the coach, is say, we've got to figure out where those, what I call those vulnerable areas are around self-belief. So I can be vulnerable around fitting in. Mm-hmm. I can be vulnerable around my identity as a starter, non-starter. And I can be vulnerable around my ability to execute if I'm a starter. So I've got to first, as the head coach, say, we're going to talk about all these things. So what does that look like? Literally creating these moments in this time during your practice time. And I know if you are a coach out there listening and you're like, I'm not doing that, because if I give up 15 minutes, like that was me. I was fully transactional X's and O's coach. I was always about X's and O. Academics, how much time do you need? So we only need 15 minutes to practice. I'm like, oh, that's 1,275 swings I'm going to lose. So if you're that coach, this conversation is not going to be fun to listen to, because you're not going to want to be able to say, I'm going to give you 20 minutes every week, every practice day to tackle these things together. Successful teams are letting their players solve the dynamics between player and self-identity. And you become the facilitator. I'm going to allow the hours. I'll get the room. We'll get the snacks. And I know coaches, I had a coach say, gosh, I thought I was coming in to be a leader and we're going to march. And now you're making me feel like I have to be the host of the party and buy the soda and the chips. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a combo. And if, just like going to a party, the minute you walk in, if someone doesn't meet you at the door and say, hey, thanks for coming, here's a cocktail, or here's where the couches are, it just sets the tone. And there is a higher expectation for women. I look at it as a backhanded compliment. There are dynamics where women struggle playing for women because they have a higher standard.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Unpack that a little bit more.
Well, I just think that there are student athletes out there that struggle with female coaches because of how they're being treated. But that behavior could be similar with a guy, but they're able to do it. Well, because he's a dude. I mean, dudes. So that tells me when they talk that way, that tells me there are different expectations. But I do feel very strongly about both genders need to focus on the human element of coaching. And whether you're a student athlete that has a propensity to struggle playing for a female coach, rarely do you struggle if that head coach creates the conditions where this is the best 2 hours of your day. And that's if you're coaching today, that's your calling, is to make it the best 2 hours of their day. The days of I'm waiting all day to go to practice and I have a life of volleyball or softball and everything else is fringe, those days are over, people. They're over. That grinder, field rat, gym rat, she is very rare. You're going to get maybe one or two of those. And even then, that might be a little bit high. And so how do you adjust and adapt to create the conditions for them to go for it, to feel emotionally safe and get the most out of them?
Well, time out just a sec, Kathy. I've got to ask this. I know you got some great questions, but I just want to go with, you said you were kind of an X's and O coach and you were like, no way, I don't want to give up that 15 minutes, and you won championships. So how is it just because, you finished coaching in 2006 and so that was the way it was then versus how it is now? Like, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because for the coaches listening who say, I want to listen to a championship coach, that's the way she did it. Now she's telling me to make sure I have an hour or 20 minutes for this. How do we make that make sense?
I would last 45 minutes if I coached the way I did in 2006 when I retired. I'd get fired, point blank. I was very transactional. I was very demanding. And even though I can look back and say, well, that was then, I have huge regrets. Knowing what I know now, I would love to go back and coach differently. I honestly believe that I think we could have won even more. But more importantly, the great thing about retiring, and I'm an alumnus, right? So now I'm with them all on alumni day and I'm getting an earful, right? It's almost like I'm getting the answer sheet. And the message regarding Sue Enquist is, I would love to go back. Did I really need to be that demeaning when we lost? Did I need to shame them as a team that much? Did it really make that big of a difference? And I think the answer is no, it didn't. I think I could have been just as effective as say, that was so ugly, I don't even have the words for it. I'll see you tomorrow. And thank goodness it's a brand new day. And I think there are coaches right now that are living in 2006 and their athletes have so much fear to be able to talk about creating emotional safety, not to mention what they're packing every day. The sport isn't as important to them as it is you. And you can say all you want. You're getting a $250,000 scholarship over 4 years. That doesn't resonate. What resonates to them is people ask me, well, if you were coaching today, what was the first thing you do? I would sit them down and say, I want to apologize on behalf of every coach you ever had that made you feel like crap. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to spend the next four years catching you doing it right, because you can have the fun zone and super high standards at the same time, but you don't have to be mean.
Right. Well, so, all right, but you still have, all right, so you have a team full of people. And you have people that don't like each other. They maybe come from completely different backgrounds, completely different value systems and everything else. What's our role as a coach? Do we say, it's fine, get over it, we're going to deal with it? Or do we say, hey, we all got to get on the same page, you got to sing from the same piece of music,
Yeah, it's both, right? So great teams bring everybody together and go, whoa, we got 21 different roads that are just meeting in one place. This idea that we have to be aligned, let's all listen as a coach. Let's all put our heads together and say, what are the lowest common denominators that we're going to buy into? And then let's have the honest conversation on who is driven by relationships and who's here to rip out the jugular of the opponent. And have an honest conversation where you're going to have one woman's going to say, you know what? I love this game because of my girlfriends. And that pumps me up. That makes me feel fearless. Perfect. I've got to make sure I take care of her in the relationship. I got another person that's like, I don't want to hear about your noise. I don't want to hear about your rainbows and unicorns. I don't want to get into Friday night spaghetti. I want you to show up rested and ready to rip out the jugular. Perfect. We know what she's got. Then as the coach, what you say is, see what we got here? Conflicting things that drive us. And now what we do is we meet in the middle. It would be so much better if we as women could get that all out on the table, and then they can have fun with it. Like, dude, I got to go to spaghetti tonight because my relationship girls, that's important for us. And you can have fun with it. And it doesn't have to be disrespectful. But what happens is we don't align. Then we go to our corners and then talk behind each other's back. And then we don't go above and beyond. Championship programs, they go above and beyond. They do a lot of I call it lonely work. They do a lot of, there's 5 or 6 players per team that go above and beyond to carry the weight for the other 5 or 6 that are giving 75%, and they give grace. So today, if you said, what's the secret sauce today? The secret sauce today is grace, unmerited acceptance. So if I'm the grinder, you came here to play that grinder. If you can learn to you get to keep your standard. Because I said unmerited acceptance. But this girl is still on the team. Coaches haven't gotten rid of her. So I'm going to have her back. Now people are going, that's very evolved. Well, you're asking me how to get everybody together. You have to have that hard conversation first. Well, Sue, that's a double standard. Okay, what alternate universe are you all working on that you think you, Mr. Transactional, Mrs. Transactional Coach, you think you're going to get everybody on the same page when they all have their iPhone, living their own singular life? It's more relevant and accurate to say we're all on different pages. We're going to agree to be on these 3 or 4 pages throughout the season and own what page you're going to be on over here. And somebody's got to be able to pick up that slack. And I know people are like, nope, that would never work. I go, what are you hanging on to? You're 8th in the conference of 10 teams. This was something I want to talk about this. You talk about people with conflict, right? I was talking to a team the other day and the player raised their hand. They said, I came to this program and we were aligning with these values. I don't know where the values came from. I was just told these are the traditional values we have and we have to align with them. And she said, no one ever asked me or my teammates what we value. And she says, you know what, Coach Enquist? We're 9th in the conference out of 12 teams. It was really jaw-dropping to go, yeah, dude, you're right. You should have a meeting with your coaches. Maybe it's time to reevaluate how you're asking people to come together. And if you're in the middle, bottom of the conference, maybe you do ask the current team, what more do we need to do? And have a coach turn from being an authoritative vertical leader to the student and the teacher are learning together. That idea, listen first and learn from what they're telling you, and then create the conditions where everybody can buy in.
So for coaches that were taught by men, coached by men, and really learned this maybe transactional grind, the shame, the whatever was acceptable from a man's version, and yet they produced great championships. And that athlete became a coach. And so that's the model they have. So when we're introducing grace and compassion and really getting on the same page, if they're looking at their kind of coach mentor model, they don't know where to even begin to figure this out. So as women, we want to know we're going to be successful. We don't want to take those big risks and be like, gosh, I feel like I'm doing this all on my own. So how do we take a woman that's been coached by men and really bring her into this new coaching style?
Well, first of all, you got to remember what is at risk. If you're not a defending champion, what are you risking?
Mm.
And defending champions are a minuscule data point in sport.
So I'll answer it for what my coaches say to me. I'm risking my job.
Mm.
I have to win or I'm going to get fired. That's what you hear all the time. And now it's way less true. It's way less true in a lot of sports than coaches say it is, because no one's buying out a contract on a nonprofit producing. But yeah, if you go through the whole contract and you're at the end of it and you're not doing very well, but also nobody wants to fire a coach when the athletes are happy.
Well,
and I think that's the part of it that gets lost in it. You can be ninth in the league and there could be a variety of reasons, bad recruiting, injuries, et cetera, but the kids are having a ball and this is a great experience in their life and everything else. Well, you probably are going to survive this.
Well, and I think also you've got to be able to remember as a championship program, and I like to say a sustainable championship program, meaning they're kind of in the thick of it every year, right? They're in the conversation for postseason every year, right? So there are many more of those. The one thing that's common through all of them, and I think we have to be careful around calling it the male model, even though I know they get the lion's share of transactional coaching. It's important that those young listeners understand it's the transactional behavior. So I'm working with some coaches right now, 28 years old, brand new head coaches, females, and they are horrible at understanding the importance of listening to their players. They're very transactional. So as much as we want to genderize it, because historically we know that the male model has been one that has been very vertical, you've got to remember now, as these young coaches are coming into these higher pressured programs, they do feel the pressure. Right. But what they have to continually understand is what are those programs doing to make sure that those players feel seen as a person first. That's new. You now have to be seen and heard as a person first, because the athlete I'm watching in the last 5-7 years, the athlete actually has put their foot down.
Yeah.
They're now saying, you know what? I've been treated like a number. Now my whole life is about volleyball. No one even asks me about my personal life. I'm kind of done. And I've got this huge platform that I can just start talking about it on Instagram. So
I got real response on my phone. I can walk out of practice and lodge a complaint.
Yep. And I can have my phone on when my coach is going through a tirade.
Right.
And
right. Got it all recorded right here.
The other thing that's interesting around, when we talk about coaches that are like, hey, my kids needed to straighten up and we had to give them a piece of our mind. But we have to understand from just a sheer definition standpoint, abuse it's cringeworthy, right? When you almost hear the word, it makes you cringe. You think sexual abuse, you think physical abuse, but the emotional abuse, that definition falls under being demeaning. Mm-hmm. So I ask all the listeners out there, those coaches that are just grinding it out, think about the tone and the tenor, think about the content of your lesson, in air quotes, that you're trying to teach your team. That demeaning falls under the umbrella of abuse.
So with young coaches particularly, you'll hear this, I have to be tough because I'm only 5 years or 8 years older than they are and everything else. And I need to earn their respect.
Yes.
And
you're absolutely right.
And I can't do that if I'm the server at the party or looked at as, weak or not in charge.
Yep. You're absolutely right. You do have to do all those things. But just like at the party, I'm going to be the one that says, don't put your drink on the hardwood table. I'm going to say that there are guidelines and I'm going to treat you with respect when I do that. I'm not going to put you down a shame hole because you put your drink on the hardwood table. And that's the nuanced difference, that you can create a emotionally safe environment with super high standards. I used to always tell our student athletes, please don't shoot the messenger here, but that wasn't good enough. They're like, Coach, we went 23 out of 24. I said, I know it's not good enough. Get back out on the field. Don't shoot the messenger. So we can have fun, play games, attempt to be perfect, but I can still say, you got to get back out there. I believe you can have both. And once you're able to create the conditions for that athlete to say, you know what? I enjoy my coach. I'm not afraid of my coach, but I also know I can't get away with anything with my coach.
Well, that's that respect component.
Is that a narrow path? It kind of is for a coach, but I'm telling you, if you want to be able to stay in the sport and not be, I always say to coaches, stay in the sport and do it the way where you have a lot of high standards and a lot of enjoyment. So when you leave the sport, you're able to give back still. Kathy, you know this better than anybody. These coaches retire. They are angry, old, crabby. What do you want, DeBoer? I'm tired. I put in 30 years. No, dude, you stayed in 10 years too long. Or gal, you stayed in 10 years too long. So I challenge the coaches to be self-reflective. Am I doing everything to set myself up for a long career? But more importantly, when I leave, I can continue to give back to the sport, because that's how the sport grows, is when the people have the ability to give back when they don't have all those rules with NC2A, because that's what that holds you back as a convention, is not having those college coaches being able to develop those youth as much as they would like to because of the rules.
Yeah, well, and what I always say to older coaches is the sport gave you a living. Now you can give the sport a life.
I love that.
Now it's a life, because you don't need the money anymore. And they go,
yeah, right.
Or they don't ever tell anybody they don't need money.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's like, hey, look, the sport gave you a living, and now give back the life.
And that's so well said. And also for our veteran coaches or people that are in the middle of their career, the other thing that I would encourage you to think about every day when your toes hit that cold floor, when you have to get up, there is somebody on your team or on your staff that's going through this for the first time. And your love of the game, that's the outer ring. Your love of the game must shine through to perpetuate their love of the game, to stay motivated or to stay in the sport as a young coach. And I'm not sure we have enough coaches out there reminding our coaches that you're a beacon, because you have been down the road. Be a beacon of light and excitement, not like a shame hole. Like you don't want to just be the shamer, like you're not doing it right. This isn't, of course, there are lots of things that are hard about coaching. There's a lot of lonely work, but think about every day this idea that I'm the light, and I want these people to leave my program with their passion intact. That was really important for us at UCLA to stay connected to the bubble, UCLA bubble, because you fell in love with the game and you fell in love with the people around you. Did you like them every day? No. Coach Wooden taught me something that I always like to share in these situations. He says, you don't have to like everybody, but you got to love them, because loving them means that you unconditionally will stand by them. And that's what we need during the gut of the season, is to stand by everybody when we turn into a goat rodeo.
Well, so you bring up that next topic that we really want to talk about, on how to train with purpose and passion. So we've certainly unpacked that inner bubble, all about ourselves. Let's move out to that second bubble and that third bubble about really training, because we can love each other. We can, like each other. We can be having fun. All that good stuff is happening. We still want to feel really accomplished on the court or, in our sport, because that is what we are there for. How do you do it?
I think you introduced this idea of what competition really is. I mean, the word competition, the Latin root is competire, which actually means come together. And so for us, we wanted to introduce this idea that everybody's job at their respective position, when there are multiple people there, everybody's job is to make the lead person the most uncomfortable. So there's always a go-to person at every position. We know there's a lead person usually. There's two people fighting it out. Perfect. Let them fight it out. But your job is never, ever to, I don't subscribe to this philosophy that you have to own your role as a backup. Mm-hmm. So my upbringing was very similar to my experience at UCLA. Was you don't ever accept that role, you execute it. Because you don't accept that role because you'll get soft Monday through Friday. Well, I'm just the backup. No, you're actually in charge of making her so uncomfortable that game day is easy. And, you know, when I was working with the USA volleyball team, we were talking about this. We got to really define how you get players to get comfortable with competition and pressure is that you organize it in a way where they can objectively evaluate themselves and evaluate their teammates without emotion. And one of the things we wanted to do is to really, really get specific. Every time someone said, we want to be this way, I would say, define what that looks like on the court, off the court, and when we're traveling, and build these very specific lists about what we're going to be, what I call micro behaviors. And I can remember during that time, it wasn't really connecting. I could tell it wasn't connecting. You know, Kathy, you remember there are times as a coach, like it's clear in your head, but it's not, you can look in their eyes and you can tell it's not going in. And I remember telling my colleague, Jill Ellis, who was our 2-time World Cup champion coach. And she's like, Sue, you know what I learned when I was coaching? I learned this whole concept, and it really had to do with Carly Lloyd around Carly never accepted that role of being a backup. And she said, I built a whole strategy around don't accept it, just execute it and come in and be a game changer. And I said, Jill, is there any way you could come talk to the team? And she came up one day to the gym in Anaheim and talked about that specifically. And I am telling you, it was like a light bulb that went on with a lot of those players that they said, awesome. I don't, you know, you've got the best women in the world. And now on this team, this Olympic team, they're in the box. They're on the bench. So to hear someone go, yeah, you don't have to accept that role. That was like perfect because I consider myself a starter. I'm the MVP in Europe or Asia. And it was a real small, influential moment. So when you're talking about your team and competing, spend time talking about what that looks like at your position. And there's only one bad guy in this per position deal. It's the coach that sets the lineup. Be angry at the coach, but don't ever be angry at each other. Be fun and be playful at your positions. Make that starter uncomfortable so they exhale on game day. And when we didn't play well, I would call out the backups. Obviously, our starters were a little bit too soft during the week. So let's ratchet that up. So good, hard competition can be so healthy once players can get comfortable with the self-reflection of whether, you know, because we're evaluating everything we do at practice, and we've got to get good at being able to say, you know what, I need to work more on my open backhand or my, you know, volleyball is amazing with all your plays. I need to work better on my slide 32 red zone 4, you know. Once players can get what I call a competitive callus, when I can get this competitive callus, this is about me getting better as a player. Coach doesn't hate me. This isn't a personal affront. My coach right now thinks that other person should be first. Perfect. I'm going to make her so uncomfortable. I'm going to work so hard right by her that game day actually is an exhale.
Well said. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, and we could go on and on. So many winning strategies, so much learning. Sue, thank you for the gift of definitely sharing with us how women win. Your way's been amazing, and I just love the transformation that you've learned from being a coach and now giving that gift of what you've learned to other coaches and to our world. So thank you so much for that. What a gift.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be with both of you.
Kathy, words of wisdom?
I want to know which of the 3 behind you is you.
Oh, none of them are, right? But it reminds
it up. We've got a surfer here.
It reminds me of a place in time. So every time I see it, it's in my living room. It just brings great joy because I'm in the water every day. So that's my leveler. So I can come ready every day.
Wow. Well done. Well, team, it's up to you. Find your leveler, whatever gets you happy and in that zone. And most importantly, really honor yourself. Lots of grace. That was one of our winning strategies today, is to live with that grace and give that grace away and be for each other. So go out and figure out how women win our way. Thank you.